First, grab the 470 ohm resistor and bend its legs downwards. Then, place it through the holes of the 470 resistor symbol on the circuit board. Bend the legs of the resistor outwards so it stays in place. Next, with a heated soldering iron, melt solder onto the pads of each leg of the resistor. With a wire cutter or any other cutting tool, cut the legs of the resistor at the base of the pads. Repeat this process with the 10K ohm resistor. Do the same with the other 10K ohm resistor. Repeat this process with the 1K ohm resistors. Next, we'll do the same for the 2K ohm resistor. Now, let's add the audio cable sockets. Start by inserting the component onto the board, flip the board over, then apply solder to the pads. Let's repeat this process with the other audio cable socket. Next, let's solder on the LED strip connector cable. Insert the cable so that the red wire is inserted to 5 volts, the green wire to data, and the white wire to ground. Now, apply solder to each of the pads. Next, let's add the push buttons. We can begin by pressing a push button onto the circuit board until it stays in place. Flip the board over and apply solder to the pads of the push button. Repeat this process for the other push button. Now, we will add the IC socket. Make sure that the semicircle cutout on the socket is on the left-hand side. Flip the board over and bend the top right and bottom left pins of the socket so that it stays in place. Now apply solder to all pins of the IC socket. Next, let's add the 1 microfarad capacitor onto the board. Slightly bend the legs of the capacitor inward and insert it into the board. Now, apply solder onto the pads of the capacitor. Then, cut the remaining legs of the capacitor at the base of the pads. Repeat this process with the other 1 microfarad capacitor. Next, insert a female header onto the board and solder each of the pads. Repeat this process for the other set of female headers. Now, we'll be adding the potentiometers. Place a potentiometer onto the board, flip it, and solder its 3 pads. Repeat this process with the other 2 potentiometers. Now add the DC barrel jack onto the board so that the hole faces the left and solder its pins. Next, add the screw terminal onto the board and apply solder onto its pads. Now, we'll add the electrolytic capacitor while making sure that its negative, shorter leg is facing the top of the board. Bend the capacitor's legs and solder, then cut the excess legs. Now, add the op-amp component onto the IC socket while making sure that the semicircle notch is facing the left. Next, add the push button caps. Now, add the microcontroller, which will already come preloaded with the code, onto the female headers. Finally, add the brass standoffs. Congratulations! You have completed the build of the Neolight board.